All right, thank you. My name is Brian Hislop. I'll be moderating this evening. I've been a College Point resident for about 20 years, and I also worked here for a few years prior in the 80s. You all know why we're here this evening. Okay, I'll do my best, thank you. Listen, there are some empty seats, so anybody, if you have an empty seat next to you, if you could raise your hand, it'll provide some of the people in the back to be seated, so thank you. Okay, so thank you all for coming, appreciate it. First, I'd like to introduce Councilman Malone.
Good evening, everyone. There's no easy way to put this. We are completely opposed to this location. We are 100%. We do want to thank PS29 and Principal Leakey. We do want to thank the 109th Precinct. We do want to thank the groups that put this together. TF 109 and PS29, TF 129, St. Agnes, MS 379. Those are the heart of College Point. Those parents, those teachers, those students, those principals, the people that live right here at the heart of College Point. And the anger that comes from the site selection process that brought us to this is where the anger comes from. It's not about the great people on the stage and their jobs and the people doing the homeless services for the city, and God bless what they do. This is about being sold out for profit by two men who deliberately deceived us, filed permits that had nothing to do with a homeless shelter, and expected us to be okay. It's not about politics, my speeches, or anything, so I'm going to sit down and listen. I was talking to everyone tonight, Jennifer Shannon, and the other groups. Jennifer, where are you? She's here somewhere. And all the groups that helped. In the back, wave your hands.
Jennifer's sick.
Jennifer's sick. You're here. And everyone has been amazing in joining together and asking what to do. We have a petition with 4,100 signatures on it. Keep signing that. We're raising funds and money for lawyers to fight. The groups are active. Stay with it for a listing of things that we're going to do come the new year, because celebrate with your families these holidays. God bless every one of you and a Happy New Year. But this fight will continue on beyond tonight. Have your voices heard. I know you're putting in your questions. Listen. Have your opposition. Tonight is a night to voice your opposition to this, to say that we're not okay with being sold out at all. So there are other folks that are going to speak. It's already 6:30, so we have our homework and our jobs and our lunches to pack and everything we have to do for tomorrow to get through this week. So I'm going to turn it over. What else?
2 sentences.
2 sentences. Here we go. 2 sentences.
Thank you, Councilman.
Michael Dem. I'm with College Point Residents Coalition. Are you guys with me? Yeah! I want to say 2 words. Shelter, no! Affordable housing, yes! This is not about College Point alone. The so-called initiative policy. I can tell you surely that this policy is not working. No. Not only in College Point, it's not working all over New York City. It's time to call a stop. Let's start from here now, from College Point. Affordable housing, yes! Shelter, no!
Thank you. Councilwoman Rosenthal, I'd like to introduce him also.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Assemblymember Dana Rosenthal, and first, before I start, I want to compliment the College Point community. It is beautiful to see how active you've all been, how you've united, and how you've worked together since the beginning. I've stood with all of you on day one in front of the proposed site, saying that College Point is not the place for a shelter. There are not proper services, transportation to have people to be able to get to have jobs. You know, we need to build a system that lifts people up, and I don't believe that College Point has the transportation services to be able to get people to work, be able to access the services that they need, to be able to help them lift up, get out of the shelter system, get them into affordable housing, get them into homes, because we need to create a system. Clearly the mayor's shelter system is failing, and we need a system that will work, bring people up, and get them out of this evil cycle of poverty and homeless shelters. And we know that College Point is not the place for that, and the entire way that this has been done has been disappointing. The way that we found out about this was that we got some calls from civic leaders that they thought some suspicious work and some suspicious permits were taken out of the building. And we found out about this through the Department of Buildings because we had questioned and asked for an audit of their permits. We did not find out from the Department of Social Services. We found out because of concerned community members, which I think is the most disappointing thing, is that the way that this has been started from the beginning. It did not start with community dialogue, it ended up with community dialogue. So I'll continue to stand with everyone here, and I do want to thank you at least for listening to their concerns, and I urge you to take the community's concerns seriously. Thank you.
2 words. Shelter! No! Shelter! No!
Okay, I think we all know why we're here. I would like to introduce the Deputy Commissioner of Homeless Services, Jackie Bray.
Thank you. Appreciate being here. I thank you all for being here, for coming out. I always know that when communities come out, it's really a signal that people are invested in their community, invested in what happens to their community. And as I've made my work in homeless services and helping the most vulnerable New Yorkers, that takes engaged and involved communities. And so I want to thank you for being here and for allowing us to be here. To my left is Erin Goodman, our Deputy General Counsel, and Akila Winston, our Associate Commissioner of Intake and Assessment for our Single Adult Program. And we're going to be here on behalf of Homeless Services all night tonight answering your questions. To my right is Jim Coughlin, Senior Vice President of West Hab. It's the provider that will be running this shelter here in College Point. I'm going to let Jim introduce his colleagues in 1 second. And I want to... So here's the deal. We're here, Jim and I are here to engage in a dialogue with you. We're here to give you information about the system. We're here to give you information about the shelter. We're not going to be able to do that if every time we talk, everyone yells. So, you know, I really do want to get a chance to answer your questions. That's why I'm here. So I would just ask that there's a little bit of respect, a little bit of decorum, just so that we can answer your questions. No other reason besides that. Jim, all right. So let me talk a little bit about homeless services, about the proposed shelter here in College Point, and then I'm going to let Jim introduce his colleagues and talk a little bit about West Hab. First of all, I want to say that obviously homelessness is a citywide crisis, and it's one that we believe demands a citywide solution or a citywide action. No one wants to experience homelessness. No one says, I'm going to grow up to be homeless. But just like how in all of your families, you have helped a sister or helped a friend or helped a cousin, there are New Yorkers who need some help. There are New Yorkers who need second chances. At any given time, we have about 60,000 New Yorkers who are experiencing homelessness. There are people from every community. There is not a single community board in this entire city that that we don't have some people in the homeless system from. Not one. There's a housing crisis in the city, and it's fueling the homeless crisis, as we know. But here's the unfortunate reality. It's not a question of housing or shelter. We need both, because shelter is for people who are in crisis. It's like saying, don't build an emergency room, only build an operating room. Of course we support housing, and we need more affordable housing. You'll find no people more rabidly pro-affordable housing than those of us who work with people experiencing homelessness. But in truth, we also need shelter, because at any given time, those who are most vulnerable amongst us need somewhere to lay their head, they need somewhere to receive services, they need somewhere with people who are committed to their second chance. In a citywide perspective, we have invested mightily in preventing homelessness and helping people experiencing homelessness get back on their feet. We've reduced evictions in this city by 27% in the last 5 years, and we have rehoused over 100,000 New Yorkers. Over 90,000 New Yorkers have left the homeless system to permanent housing through city-backed or state-backed or federally backed rental assistance, and over 10,000 New Yorkers have been prevented from becoming homeless through our prevention programs. People need help to get back on their feet. It's why we're here, and it's what shelter provides. So let me give you some facts so that we can have a dialogue rooted in facts. The shelter proposed here in this community would be a 200-bed single men's shelter. It would be run by one of our very best providers, Westpac. They're going to tell you more about themselves. Here's the deal. Guys, here's the deal. Here's the deal. I am here to answer questions. I'm here to answer questions, but I cannot do that. I cannot answer your questions. Every time I talk, this is the reaction. So give me the opportunity to answer your question. Give me the opportunity to answer your question. So what I'm asking is for the opportunity to answer your question. Okay? Give me the opportunity to answer your questions. I do want to answer your questions. I see and I understand that there's a lot of fear in the room. I see that there's a lot of fear in the room. I get that. Okay. But here's what we're going to do. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to wait, because we just cannot answer questions if people can't hear us.
Where were your questions before? You snuck in! The FBI should be investigating you!
I'm waiting for him to come get me. So you said 200.
Okay.
It's already 243. I got the permit. Take my bag.
So that we can get to questions, I'm going to let him introduce his team, tell you a little bit about West Hub, and then we'll dive right into questions.
Good evening, everyone. To
to continue on Jackie's sentiment, we really do look forward to an opportunity to answer as many questions as we can tonight. And frankly, we look forward to the opportunity to working with you the next few months and few years as we get this program operating.
Go away! Go away! Go away! Go away! You should fucking go! Go away!
Everything you said, Jackie's writing is a lie. You lied, nothing comes out of your mouth is true. You stood up there, you said 200 people. I got a permit in my bag right now that says 243.
Liar! Liar!
So Jim's going to introduce himself, then I'm going to address this issue, and then hopefully we'll be able to take questions.
Okay, so with me I have our security director. I know there'll be a lot of questions about security tonight, Mr. Daniel Lyles. And also with me is Valerie C. Smith, our assistant vice president, who will be able to talk about the program itself. As I said, we do look forward to the partnership. We understand that we can't do this alone. We are going to need the support. And with that, let's move into questions.
Okay, so the first question I have is how many beds, right? I have that question right here. So there is a local city law that says no new shelter can operate at over 200 beds. We will follow the law. We do not break the law. I don't know what permit you're referring to. We can look at the permit, but I promise you, because I'm legally required, there will not be more than 200 clients at this shelter at one time. Okay, so here's what we want to do. We want to do questions. Christian, I see you there. Will you raise your hand? Okay, there is a mic right here. Matt, Amanda's over here. Okay, how do we want to do questions? Do you want to read some of yours first, and then we'll take questions from the audience?
What we propose is we have some questions submitted online.
Why did they first lie?
Excuse me, we
That's a question.
First of all,
I know you got.
I have not lied. It's the second time I've come out of this community. But second of all, yes, of course I have shelters in my neighborhood. I have 5 shelters in my neighborhood. Brian, let's take some questions.
Okay, first question. College Point is on the most northern tip of Queens and has nothing to offer these residents. How is this helping people experiencing homelessness?
Thanks for that question, appreciate it. So let me say, first of all, we have men, women, and families in our system who are from this community, right? And one of the tenets of what we're doing in homeless services right now is trying very hard to open shelters where we have no shelters so that people who are experiencing homelessness from those communities can be sheltered closer to the important social supports that we know are critical to return people to stability. Things like houses of worship or family members or jobs or even sort of the deli people used to go to or the park people used to hang out with. Maintaining stability can be incredibly important when someone's experiencing the trauma of going through an episode of homelessness. And so why do we think this neighborhood's appropriate? We think this neighborhood's appropriate because it's a neighborhood where we don't have any shelters. We're looking across the city at neighborhoods where we don't have any shelters, but where we know that we have people in our system who come from those neighborhoods who need the opportunity to return. In addition, as I said 2 weeks ago, I think it was 2 weeks ago, when I was last here, not in this school, but last with many of you, this will be a 200-bed shelter, primarily for men from Queens. So when we look for shelters, we look at lots of different factors, but one of the things we look at is where communities have no shelters and where we need beds to try to shelter people closer to the communities that they called home. Let's take the next question, Bill.
Okay. Next question. According to the New York City Police Department statistics, there have been nearly 2,000 shelter arrests since January 1st. 426 of these arrests were felonies. These are shocking statistics. I would like to know how you can ensure the safety of my children as well as my family walking these streets. The facility has 5 schools. How is this safe? Please don't tell us about the 140 cameras and your 43 security guards and the people that will supposedly be walking around this community.
Okay. In a moment, I'm going to pass to Mr. Lyles to talk about how West Hab approaches security at shelters. I do want to say that as we've discussed in the past, when people look at arrest statistics from shelters or incidents at shelters, one of the things that I think people really misinterpret is how much of that is interpersonal in the shelter. So for example, it's not a good thing, but one of the leading reasons people are called to assist at shelters is due to domestic violence in our family shelters or adult family shelters. And so those statistics, and I think this is important, those statistics are largely about things that have happened on site that we're responding to. They're not about things that have happened in the community. But obviously we work every day. And many of the arrests that are included in statistics like that are low-level drug offenses. We work with our clients. We work very hard with our clients to address substance use issues, and we bring and take a treatment approach to substance use, which we think is really important. But I'm going to let Mr. Lyles talk about security specifically at West Hab sites.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
Why are you bringing homeless men?
My name is Daniel Lyles. I am the Security Director for West Hab Incorporated. I want to thank you for inviting us here. Hopefully I can shed some light on the type of security services that we will be providing. We are a professional security operation operating in a human services environment. We operate from 2 perspectives. The first is basic security principles, such as access control and responding to emergencies. All of our staff members are trained in basic first aid, CPR, conflict resolution. We'll be working with the police department. I'll be working with members of the community to ensure that the community is safe. I look forward to working with each and every one of you to ensure that College Point is safe. Thank you very much.
Just to emphasize what Mr. Lyles is talking about, about 15 years ago, West Hab opened its own security school. So all of the security staff that we have throughout the agency are New York State certified. They get the same training that the DHS police officers are getting in our shelters. This particular shelter will be staffed with 35 regular security personnel and 6 shift supervisors as well as a manager. It sounds like some of you heard a little bit of this in the last meeting, but we take the security very seriously. We will be doing patrols outside of the building, in the community. We will be looking to partner with the local businesses, with all of you in this room, with our good neighbor policy. We really want to hear what you guys have to say around security. We really want the opportunity to work with all of you regarding security.
Excuse me, where the homeless men are going to go during the day when they're out?
Okay, let's take that question. That's a great question.
They're going to come to our backyard.
Okay, all right, hold on. So first of all, I just want to reiterate, we've got the moderator has questions, and when we're ready to take questions, we'll call people up who have signed up for questions. But I'm going to take this question right now because it's a great question. And then let's do this. Let's call the first 4 people up so that they're in line.
I'm going to ask one more question.
You're going to ask one more question. Okay, let's do that, and then we'll come back to that question.
Answer the question.
So the question was, where do people go during the day? It's a great question. So first of all, 30% of our clients work. They're employed.
30%?
We all know that often...
What about the 70%?
We all know that often, even if you're working, it's not enough to afford rent in this city, right?
Where is the rest going to go?
Our clients will go to work.
Where is
Some of them will go to school. Some of them will be involved in programs like job training programs or resume building programs. Others will be involved in activities that the shelter plans. Jim, maybe you could speak to that.
Right. One of the things that we've implemented within our shelter model is a really extensive employment and training program. So the gentlemen in this shelter will be involved in internship programs, employment and training programs, job readiness programs. There will not be an opportunity to sit around and do nothing. So we will have activities on site for them to do during the day, particularly around employment and training.
All right, I'm going to call up 4 names for people to step up to the mic. As you guys are coming up, I'll ask one more question, and we'll go to the 4 questions at the mic. Okay, we were told there were 40 security guards. What type of homeless men? Where are they coming from? Which prison?
Okay, so New Yorkers experiencing homelessness come from every community in New York. For this shelter, we are going to look to transfer men who are from Queens originally, particularly men from this community or communities close to this community, into this shelter. This is a general population shelter, so men with serious mental illness or serious substance use issues will not be transferred into this shelter. This will not be a shelter where anyone can just walk up to it. So the way that our system works is that we have an intake center. It's a single intake center. It's on 30th Street and 1st Ave in Manhattan. If you're new to the shelter system, you might go to that center to say that you need help. At that point, you're placed in an assessment facility. This is not an assessment facility. We've got assessment facilities around the city. We've got 4 of them for single men. Is that right, Akila? Okay, so we've got 4 assessment facilities for single men. You would spend about 30 days in an assessment facility where we would do an evaluation of what program is best to place you in. So this shelter will be referred men from Queens who have no serious mental illness, no serious substance use disorder, don't need those type of clinical services on site. We got a question about prison. So let's talk about that. Let me just say, when you are, at the coffee shop, I promise you there are people around you, neighbors around you that you don't think are homeless, who are experiencing homelessness or who have experienced homelessness. These are New Yorkers experiencing a moment of vulnerability. But yes, do some people who are coming back from serving time end up not having a place to go? And we serve those New Yorkers? Absolutely, because like I said, we deeply believe that people deserve second chances, and we employ really good not-for-profit social service providers like WestHab, who have a lot of history working with New Yorkers who need help getting that second chance, whether that is New Yorkers who are coming out of an abusive relationship. The leading cause for homelessness in New York City is domestic violence, or whether or not it's New Yorkers returning from having served time in the criminal justice system.
Okay, the format on the floor will be, each person will be given 2 minutes per question. We'll go to the floor now. Please introduce yourself, thank you.
Okay, my name is Bill Dykes, D-Y-K-E-S, and I've been living in this neighborhood for 28 years. And I think you're missing the point. First of all, thank you all for coming and allowing everybody to come, but you're missing the point. If you drive around this community like I have for 28 years, that spot particularly, a lot of St. Andrews girls hang around that corner. A lot of school kids. It's not whether you have security, you have this. If you had moved the homeless shelter down somewhere near the police academy or away from the homes, it would have been better. But to say that you have to put, because you have a certain percent, which probably isn't much, a certain percent from this community, you have to move 90% of this community, we all disagree with. It's the location. It's not all these things that you're talking about, it's the location. We have children here, we have businesses, and one last point. In March 28,
The entrance to College Point. The entrance to College Point. That's where they're putting them. That's where everyone enters College Point.
On March 28, 2016, a study was released, and Realtor.com released it, that when you put homeless shelters too close to residents, all the homes in the area dropped 12.7%. And I have that link if you want it. I'm not just saying it. 12.7%. So we have children, people, businesses, and homes that are going to be affected. Just don't move it right into the center of the community. Thank you.
That is correct. That's the entrance to College Point. That's where you're putting it. You make.
Yes, hello. My name is Joe Gerardo. I've been in College Point since 1973. You say that the residents of this shelter are not seriously ill. Well, maybe you need to define serious. Perhaps your definition of serious is different than ours. You cannot guarantee us peace of mind as community members. You cannot guarantee the parents of children in College Point peace of mind. You cannot guarantee that these people are not drug addicts, alcoholics, or mentally ill, and do not belong in this community. You cannot guarantee us peace of mind.
So here's what I want to say. We have shelters across the city that are near schools. We have shelters across the city that are near businesses and that are in residential neighborhoods. In fact, we believe deeply that our clients have every right and need and deserve to be integrated into communities. That's how we can, as workers, all help those who are most vulnerable amongst us get that second chance, get back on their feet, move to stability as quickly as possible. I know, and I hear, and I feel the fear and the anger in the room, particularly as it relates to the schools and the kids. I want to say that sincerely we take that seriously. We have experience across the city opening shelters near schools, and we know how to give the community what they need to feel comfortable with that. So for example, West Hab will be staffed appropriately to make sure that there's staff outside the facilities during drop-off and pickup, not because we think that that's needed in terms of our clients' behavior, because our clients are just like you and I, but because we believe very much that we want to give you the assurance, we want to make sure that you see us in the community, and that if there are any problems, we're there to address them quickly. That's the first thing. The second thing is that we all, DHS and West Hab, have good neighbor policies. When clients of ours are behaving in a manner that violates those good neighbor policies, West Hab has the ability to call us up and request a transfer, which we honor all the time. Akila's team puts lots of resources into making sure that our clients are going to be successful wherever they're placed. So I really just want to say that I hear the fear and I get it. I understand it. I was home this weekend. Talking to my stepmom who went to St. Agnes and said, "You're putting a shelter where?" And she and I had a really robust conversation about what she would have thought about that when she were going to school in this community. And we talked about how often it can be that people get scared of people experiencing other things from them. But I really believe that if you give our clients a chance, they will show you that they're just like you and I, that they need the help getting back on their feet.
My name is Stephanie. I've been living here for 15 years now. I've been growing up in this neighborhood, and I'd first like to say that you do not understand anything that we're saying right now. You're not listening to us at all. You're at least all schools in this area, and you're not doing anything to help. I I'd like to understand how you're going to protect the kids from walking to and from school every single day. And you've also stated that you guys have looked at many different factors. What are these factors that you're looking at? Because none of these are helping our community.
So here are things we do in other shelters that we're going to do here when communities have concerns.
Yeah, can you let the guy from West Hab answer?
Yeah, I think to answer that question, I sort of answered it before, that these guys aren't going to be hanging out and loitering in the community.
How do you know that? How do you know that?
Because it happens in our other programs. We're going to implement the same model that we have in our other programs that's been very successful here in College Point. Guys are going to be enrolled in education programs and job training programs. They're going to be working. They're going to be involved in recreation programs within the shelter. It's not going to be the opportunity to loiter within the community. And as we also said, we will have staff outside of the building in case that does happen, where we will be able to address that.
So you're already anticipating that this might happen, that people are going to walk around.
I can't hear it.
I said, you're already anticipating that there are going to be people walking around if you're going to have security ready for this.
We're putting security out there to make you feel better.
Absolutely, but there are kids walking around the streets and already
we're not anticipating that to be an issue. We do this in all of our programs. All of our programs.
My name is Denise, and as someone who is legally blind, I absolutely do not feel safe. West Hab is not answering 911 calls, and I do not feel that you can keep us safe. So it's not fear that you're hearing, it's anger. And the fact that no one consulted us and that you weren't being transparent. The community has not been involved. And then you mentioned a program that the 30% of the guys might go to. That's 2 trains away and a bus away. It makes no sense. You're putting them in a place that makes no sense. We're not even setting them up for success. Aside from the fact that the children and the people of the community will not be safe. West Hab is not answering 911.
Thank you. Thank you.
I didn't hear a specific question here, but what I did hear was that we're not the ones answering 911. That's certainly true, the police are. And DHS has an incredibly tight relationship with the NYPD. Our security is managed and overseen by the NYPD. We coordinate incredibly closely with the local precincts, including the fact that we have a management team at DHS that is PD, we have a homeless outreach unit that's a special unit in PD, and then we work directly with the COs and the precincts, and they communicate back to us any concerns they have. They'll communicate directly to West Hab any concerns they have, and we'll work together to address those. So yes, we aren't the one answering 911 calls, but we've got an incredibly tight relationship with PD.
Thank you. My name is Chuck Apelian. I'm the vice chair of our community board 7 over here, which represents College Point. I completely agree with all the statements that are coming from here in the audience as far as security and everything else that's being addressed. What I don't understand is how this project even got to first base. You're building this in a manufacturing district. It's an M1, and in a manufacturing district, residential use is not allowed at all. I don't understand how you're going to be housing homeless, and you're saying that that is something that you're allowed to do in a manufacturing district.
So all of our sites are rigorously inspected and go through rigorous approvals, including through DOB. Including through the City Department of Buildings, which regulates and enforces those codes, and we follow all applicable zoning law and codes. This site won't open with all of the T's crossed and the I's dotted when it comes to those issues.
That according to what you just said, this is not allowed, period. If this is according to regulations and DOB has already been contacted, this is not a permitted use. So how could you go forward with this and be spending a lot of time and concerning so many people, upsetting so many people at this time of year.
We have for years open shelters in M1 zones. This is totally consistent with what has been doing,
It's not,
what
you're not
DOT has
answering.
approved.
You're not answering. Sir, maybe you, I know you're whispering to help, maybe you can address this a little better, because it is not a permitted use.
I am answering you. Transient use out in an M1 zone. This is transient use. We have open shelters for years.
You're telling me that all these residents are going
DOB has approved them for years. What we're doing is consistent with that.
Let's explain to the people what you're saying. Transient means that you're saying that no one is going to be here for more than 30 days? That defines transient use.
What I'm saying is that our shelters go through rigorous rounds of approval.
You're giving me You're giving me rhetoric right now. I'm asking you direct questions. I understand policy. I'm trying to speak to you professionally and articulately. Are you telling me that your residents will be there less than 30 days?
Our single men tend to come in and out of shelter. They tend to not spend full months in shelter. And we have, as I said, we work with all of the city enforcement agencies to make sure that all of our T's are crossed, all of our I's are dotted here.
Okay. I'll close by saying...
On to the next question.
I'll close by saying this is an illegal use. Thank you. Thank you.
Fine, are we calling names?
Hello, everybody. My name is Jane Muller. I've been living in College Point since I'm 12 years old. I'm now 76. You do the math. I watched this town change. I watched the past mayor put in all kinds of additional housing that we never needed. The population has doubled. The transportation is awful. Getting around this town is almost impossible. I walk it most of the time for that reason. I was going to say pretty much everything he said, but I want to add one thing. Why 200 men? What about the women? What about young people that are out of work? What about seniors that need places to go? I'd much rather see seniors in this community, our community, taken care of, as opposed to strangers coming in here who we don't know, we don't really know anything about them, and I would like you to stick to your agenda. You're not answering our questions. So I'll go back over my questions. Why only men? One at a time, one question. Simple answer. Please.
So we determine the population for a shelter based on the need. And right now our need is for single men shelters.
I'm sorry. You did not answer the question.
So
I said why only men?
So we don't, our shelters are segregated on gender. We don't have mixed gender shelters. For our shelters, we have families with children shelters, single men shelters, single women's shelters, and adult family shelters.
One more time.
This building.
One more time. Why only men in College Point? Just answer that question.
We determine what type of shelter we need based on the number of people we see coming in, the physical need to bed specific people, and what we need right now is single adult men shelter.
All right, you know what the problem is with this meeting? We weren't told as a community in the beginning it was coming. That's the main factor here. Now you're here, you brought up the community, and all you do is push your agenda. That has to stop. You've got to answer our questions.
Thank you. My name is Susan Nicoletti. I'm the principal at St. Agnes Academic High School in College Point. I agree with one of the men who spoke previously, and I think many of us know that there is a need for shelters, just not here. I don't think you did your homework. You have no idea, in my opinion, of the number of children that are surrounding the building that you feel is the right place for the homeless shelter. My students will be leaving the building after sports events. Sometimes they don't leave my building until 7:30, 8 o'clock at night. Who's going to be walking them to the bus stops? Who's going to be watching for their safety? I'd like an answer. Who's going to be watching my girls?
So as we said earlier, you know, this shelter will be heavily staffed with security. We will have outside outside of the building, 1 block radius of the program. And also just to reiterate, we've been operating shelters now for 30 plus years, 3 years now in the city. And the model that we've implemented in the city, in terms of what you're describing, like loitering and guys hanging out, we have not had that issue. We're confident.
Well, I tend to disagree. When I look at the statistics, the radius of crime surrounding shelters is apparent to all of us here. We've done our homework.
Let's go to the next question.
I'm going to read, I have a...
I mean the last question being safety around schools, which I think Jim and I have answered several times tonight. I'm happy to answer that again. So I will say again, and Jim will say again. DHS has run shelters, including single men's shelters, near schools for decades. We know how to run safe shelters. We also know our clients are New Yorkers who need a little help getting back stably housed. They are not bad people. And there appears to be a presumption in the room that our clients are inherently bad people, which is simply not true. And I can say it's not true, not in a Pollyanna way, but because we know our clients, because we do this work every single day. West Ham has been running shelters for 30 years. They've never had an incident the type of which you are imagining. So let me say this again, right? We really think of this as a three-pronged strategy to make sure that your concerns are addressed. First, and most importantly, we set a culture of dignity and a culture of being a good neighbor. And that's important, and that goes a long way. When people are treated with respect, they treat others with respect. It's really true. And Jim and his team and Valerie and her team are incredibly good at setting a culture inside their shelters of respect. Second thing is that we have physical security and human security, right? We have security guards and cameras to understand what's happening and to make sure that when there is an incident, we respond quickly. And finally, we have community engagement staff who go out of the shelter, can walk several blocks from the shelter to make sure that there's no behavior that we see that needs to be addressed. Now let's take the next question.
We'll get more questions answered or lied about if we quiet down, please. You maybe... Okay, is there a reason why the community was not informed about the shelter because of it illegal under the city charter?
Thanks for that question. I don't know illegal in the city.
I don't know.
Reading the question. Okay.
I'm reading.
So I'm not exactly sure what that's about, but so first of all, let me say I am really sorry that we didn't proactively notify about this.
You're sorry. You're sorry. You said sorry to the house. Oh, you can say you're sorry to the house.
I'm going to be up here for several hours, and if I have to yell by the end of the night, I promise you won't be able to hear me. So I'm going to say again, I'm really sorry that we didn't proactively notify about the shelter. It is always, always, always our intent to proactively notify a community. In previous administrations, shelters used to be opened in the middle of the night with no notice. We made a commitment several years ago to not do that, to never do that again. And the commitment we made was to ensure that there would be community notification. We have now averaged, in our Turning the Tide shelter plan, we've notified on 29 shelters across the city. We've averaged about 80 days worth of community notice. On this shelter, it's not scheduled to open till September. Okay, summer 2019, and so for this shelter, we'll have given probably 6 months plus notice by the time we open the shelter. What happens when communities learn about shelters, so what happens is that a not-for-profit will propose a shelter. They'll send us a proposal. We will then go through the city procurement process, which includes a pretty lengthy period of time in which we are not able to publicly talk about the shelter while it's going through rating, while we're negotiating the contract and negotiating the budget. So that's what happened, is that we were in the middle of that process. And obviously work was getting done on the site, not with a city contract in place or anything like that, but work by the landlord was getting done on the site at their own risk as this was going through procurement, and so we were unable to notify until recently.
Okay, I have a question here, and I'm going to add on to the question because this is stuff. The question is, what kind of guards will be working at the facility? And I want to add to that, I'm assuming they're not armed, training, radios, etc. On top of that, what other employees are going to be there? I mean, this is a place for beds, there's no social services, so you have guards, a manager, what does this all entail?
Well, that's a great question. I know we've been talking a lot about security, but let's talk a little bit about the services that we will offer on site. So I'll get Daniel to answer the security question there. But on the service side, we will have program directors, we will have social workers on site, we will have case management staff on site. We will be heavily staffed with employment and training counselors on site, as well as recreation coordinators, keeping these gentlemen busy during the day who aren't involved in educational and employment and training activities. The program has somewhere in the neighborhood of 55 staff in total, which includes security and the service staff. Not all 55 will be there, every minute of the day, but spread out over the course of 24 hours. We will have service staff there, though. It won't be a 9-to-5 program. We'll have case management staff and social work staff there, in the late evening, and some overnight staff as well. And then to answer the security question, I'll let Mr.
We will have 24-hour security services in the building. All the security staff there will be professionally trained. There will be two-way radios to communicate with at the site.
One of the other staff members that we will have on board are housing specialists. These housing specialists would work with each of the clients that are assigned to us to move them back in the community. And so we will be identifying what the barriers are that are impacting each of our residents, addressing those, and then linking them with housing and with support services so that they will not be coming back into the shelter system.
We don't want them here. We're already on the ground.
Okay, next question.
Okay, we're going to go take from the floor on the left, my left.
Yeah, my name's Lou, and as a father, what I concern is my kids. That's it. Daytime working, nighttime, we are sleeping, right? But who knows the previous house? You say the community is gonna be safe, but last year, my van got broken in right in front of my house. We found homeless people. Once they come, what's gonna be? Are you gonna be responsible for that? Are you gonna respond for that? I got 2 kids, all right? I got 2 kids. Do I have to send them pay extra money to the after school without they playing around in front of my house or my backyard? I have no bodyguard in my house. My parents are old. My kids are too little. You ruin our kids' future. Why? Because we have to lock them in the house. We not allow them to go outside because outside is dangerous. I'm not saying all of them are bad, but what happened? What happened if one of them hurt us? And then you're gonna say sorry for us? And then after that you're gonna say sorry for us? Come on, man.
We have news articles when you there.
Oh. You know, I said this before and I'm going to say it again and I'm going to keep saying it. Our clients are people who need a second chance, who need a helping hand. They are not dangerous people.
Fine, we got one right here.
Excuse me. Good evening. Good evening. My name is Dana Sellers. I've been a resident of College Point since 1996. I worked 2 jobs to get the money to save up to buy a home, to be a proud homeowner. And I worked very hard to do that. I have fought for this community. If you look around, look at our faces. We're multicultural. This is a beautiful, integrated community. And while we speak different languages, and we pray to different faiths, we are united in our feelings that this would ruin us. And we will remain united. This is not fair to us. There is so much property in New York City that is not being used. North Brother Island is vacant. This money could go to the city, building a beautiful complex and not having to hire somebody to do it. New York can do it. Amazon is getting billions of dollars worth of tax credits. Our taxes have doubled in 14 years, but woe unto me if I don't pay it. Why isn't Amazon stepping up to the plate after all the give-outs that New York is giving Amazon? What about us? You want to help the homeless? Guess what? We have hearts. We care about all people. We're asking you to care about us. Care about us. We're middle class. But don't measure our hearts by our bank accounts, because we will be together and we won't give up.
State Senate-elect John Lewis here and would like to speak.
Come on, John, help us.
Good evening, College Point. A lot's been said already, and I am gonna try. I don't want to fuel the flames because, as you can see, everybody's on fire, and there is a great deal of concern. Look, I mean, these people are doing their job, not particularly well, I must say. They're trying to do their job. Everybody here, as you can see, is very concerned. We have hundreds of people in this auditorium, or in this gymnasium, and auditorium, and then we have actually lots of people outside who can't get in because of the capacity of the place. Took me a while to get in also. I'm not in office yet, but in a few weeks I will, and this is a very, very important issue. I have been speaking with Councilmember Paul Vallone and Assemblymember Dan Rosenthal. They have had access to all the records, and they've kept me abreast about what the situation is. You know, there are a lot of problems, a lot of questions about what's happened here.
Yes or no, John?
No, we don't. If you listen to these people, we have thousands of children right here in the immediate area. And I know of lots of homeless shelters across the city. And we do need homeless shelters. But not in the middle of 3,000 children. 5 schools, and in an area that really is not accessible. So you're not doing these men a great deal of service here by sticking them all the way out here where they're just not going to have access to the services that they need, training that they deserve, and the job opportunities that might be available to them. So, they're going to do their best to answer the questions. The problem is that, it seemed like you're trying to convince people that this is the way to go. You're never going to convince this town here. And so we're going to have to organize very, very specifically and very efficiently, because this is a shelter that just cannot proceed. If you look at the process that's led us up to this point, we understand that you have you've improved on the notification process that the previous administration, all right, fine, whatever. It's still not good enough. And there are questions about exactly what kind of financing, what kind of economics went into this particular deal. I mean, as I understand it, it's $2,000 per room per month. Is that totally off the wall, or is that roughly the number?
Well, I would have to do a little math, which I can do after we take the next question in my head. Certainly, the shelter is a...
Don't do the math, just give us the total number, the number that you know of.
So the shelter contract is about a $9 million contract annually for this size shelter. That includes all the services, transportation, it includes housing and specialists and all of that. Certainly shelter services is an expensive service, but that's because we really wrap services around our
$9 million per year? Is that $9 million per
$9 million annual contract.
Well, $9 million a year, I mean, I'm not that good with the math, but that's about $750,000 a month. Right? That's about $750,000 a month. And divide that by 200 people. I mean, that is an enormous cost. I thought it was $2,000 a person per month. $750,000 divided by 200 people, if you say it's 200 people. I mean, we're talking about almost $4,000 a month per person. If we could get $4,000 a month for our school children, each one of them, how much better it would ask. So, this is a huge consideration that I've been looking at. I mean, exactly, if it's $750, it turns out to be $3,750 a month for each of these people. Now, we're not saying that they should not deserve services. Many of the people here said that. We have a heart, we have compassion. Think about it, $3,750 per person per month here. And the average amount that our kids get in schools, especially at the 5 around here, what's the average there? It's certainly not $3,000. The average is $18,000 a school child each year. That comes to $1,500 a month. $1,500 a month for our school children, $3,750 a month for each of these people. We want to help the people, but I don't think that they're getting $3,750 a month in services either. Somebody is making a lot of money off this. And by the way, this is what Councilmember Paul Vallone has been briefing me on, because he has had access directly to these numbers that I don't yet have. I will have in a couple of months. All right, but this calls into the question exactly how this deal came about. And why is it being put in this particular property in the middle of thousands of children? We heard from the principal. I mean, she makes a very, very good point. It's not that people are opposed to the homeless. People understand there is a homeless crisis going on in this city. But you got to do a better job. And you got to think about how many more people you would have been able to serve with the $9 million if you had put it in a more efficient location and made sure that the deals were put together in the right format. This administration, we've had issues. Probably people don't know about it, but we had the issues with the Riverland House downtown. Some developer, this particular developer, according to my understanding, went ahead and took a humongous risk by developing this property supposedly without guarantees. I find that extremely hard to believe. Extremely hard to believe. So I'm not here to get applause. I'm not trying to, as I said, pour fuel on the flames. But these are some questions that this administration, and you guys are here sent by the mayor to take the bullets for him. Well, you know what? We're not blaming you personally, but the city has to be held accountable for this. So, your job is to take back, there's going to be some people who have angry rhetoric. Okay, that's fine, that's expected. This is a town hall, this is a meeting. But there are people, don't focus on people who are just simply saying, we don't want this, period. There are many people, almost every one of the speakers has made an important point. And we want you to take that back to City Hall, back to Bill de Blasio himself, and make sure he understands these kinds of questions. And then I myself am going to be working with Councilman Malone and Assemblyman Rosenthal and ensuring that the process was completely followed, which we don't think it was, and what kinds of deals went into this, because somebody is making a huge amount of money. And this is not supposed to be a money-making venture. This is supposed to be about providing services effectively, efficiently for those who need them. $9 million a year for 200 spots is absolutely exorbitant and outrageous. Please take that back. We'll look to hear more information from you. But at the end of the day, no matter how much information you give, it does not appear that you're going to convince anybody in this room that this is necessary. And so we are clearly going to fight you all the way to the end.
We want to fight, all of us. We will unite, we will fight.
I work law enforcement out of the state of New York Supreme Court right here in Queens. I see on a daily basis the extremely negative situations that are generated out of homeless shelters. I just want to let you know, Daily News, April 25th, 18. This is the title of the article, City Lying About Safety at City Shelters. Lies notoriously about the crimes that are generated out of homeless shelters. The New York Times, May 25th of 18, doctoring the safety statistics. That's the title of the article. There are dozens of others like this. I must add this. Coming from the dais, there is an air of moral superiority. What I'm saying is that you are petitioning like a high school girl for 200 people. I'm petitioning for 80,000 that don't buy your bureaucratic mumbo-jumbo. We are going to fight this to the end, and we're going to be out in front of that shelter. You're going to be having to watch us. You make no mathematical or moral sense.
Yeah, first of all, College Point is sick and tired of your lies and deceit. Right?
My name is Robert. I have been here for 24 years. And all these people are my friends, my neighbors. If they not even one resident in College Point wants this shelter in this location, why can't you just move it? Why not? It's very simple. Just move it. You haven't built it yet. Why do you have to go against all the residents of College Point? Simply move it to a different location where there are no schools around. Come on, College Point.
When community boards work with us, we have worked with communities from time to time. When we proposed a shelter location, and a community has come forward and said, not that, but here is another shelter location. It's in the same community, it's in the same area, and it can open on time. We have entertained that. And in fact, we had a site open recently, or maybe several months ago in the Bronx, in which that exact thing happened, where we proposed a shelter. A community came to us and said, you know, we get it, we know we need to do our part, but instead of this building, take this building. It's available, it can open on time, it can fit as many people, it's the same type of shelter. And so we absolutely do have that dialogue with communities.
And you're trying to make programs out of deals that were done under the table by politicians. Yes. All right? So the whole point is, since I was in that field, the men that are coming to any shelter, who gives them their medication? How is their medication taken care of?
Let's hear.
It varies shelter to shelter, but I'll let West End talk about it, their shelters.
That's very important. How are the medications given? Because if I look around here, out of 200 people, you all have to take meds daily. If you go to the doctor every year and you're over 25, you got statins, hypertension. Go ahead.
Okay, so the shelter is about people, not for folks that have mental health issues. But in my other sites, clients that are taking medication, I staff and the case manager monitor them to take the medication.
Where is the cap?
It depends on what the medication is.
So you're saying they keep the meds out wherever they want. I'm just saying that.
All of our clients are adults, and so we monitor. So if they're taking medication that needs to be refrigerated, then it's refrigerated. If it's other medication, it's kept in their rooms, and they administer themselves with the help of my staff. I can't.
All of our clients, all of our single adult clients have lockers that lock, and they can keep their things in their lockers.
Are these dorms? Are they 4 per room? How is this working?
Great question. So all of our single adult sites are dorm style, and the dorms can range in size. Actually, Jim, maybe you can speak specifically to this building.
Yeah, this will be dorm setting. The dorms will range anywhere from 15 to 20 single men per dorm.
And each individual has a bed and a locker, and then the state regulates the amount of square footage per person per dorm.
It's 80 feet per person.
Hi. What happens when one of your so-called clients gets arrested? Does it go back to the shelter that night, or when he gets out of jail?
So it depends on what the charge is.
Breaking into a car, for
Let me answer the question. So if someone gets arrested and then sort of cycles through that system and is released, then yes, they would go back to the shelter, their home shelter. If someone gets arrested for something that happened on site at the shelter and the provider and DHS determines that it's not appropriate for that person to return to that shelter, that could be anything from like assault involving another client to if there's any crime committed in the community, then we would transfer that individual so that they went to a different new shelter.
So when my car gets breaking into, they can go back to your shelter when they get out of jail?
Say that again, I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
When my car gets broken into, they go back to the shelter when they get released on bail?
So, I just want to say, first of all, our clients don't commit additional or more crime than other people. But if a client of ours was involved in a car break-in, we would most likely transfer that person
to another shelter and give them that problem.
To another shelter, but that would really be up to the provider and to the case manager to determine what the appropriate response is.
One last question, who's going to feed these 200 people? Are they going to be cooking on site, or are they going to have to go out and eat somewhere else?
No, there won't be cooking on site. What we will have is a warming kitchen. We have a food provider that will be delivering 3 meals a day. The food will be warmed on site and then served by staff.
Okay, let's take the next question.
Does we have a question? Excuse me. My name is Kim Cody. I'm the president of the Greater Whitestone Taxpayers Civic Association. I'm here in support of my neighbors in College Point. I'm also a member of Community Board 7. I have one question. You say that these people, after 10 o'clock, will not be allowed to enter the facility. What are they going to be doing walking around this community after 10 o'clock at night?
So, I'm sorry, I don't believe we said that, and let me clarify. We have a 10 p.m. curfew at DHS across our entire system. If you have school-age children and you're in a families with children site, it's a 9 p.m. curfew. That means that all of the men that are assigned to the shelter are expected to be back and in by 10 p.m. We do a bed check at 10 p.m. It does not, unless they're working. If they're working, they can have a work path. We know the work hours, and then they're allowed to be out and come back at a later time, given their working hours. Turned away, they don't stand outside. They're welcomed into the shelter. These guys will give that client that bed.
Wait. Don't we have an available bed? You only have 200 people available bed.
And the way that our single adult, good question, the way that our single adult system works is that you're assigned a shelter for a year. You might leave.
A year? What about 30 days? Transient.
So, like I said, our clients are transient. So they might come in and be sheltered for, say, 3 weeks. Then a client might leave and say, try to go stay with their mom, might try to make that work, or they might have gotten a job, gotten a little money, started paying a room rental, and then that might not work out. Mom might kick you out again, or your job falls through, and you would come back to that shelter.
You're talking out of two sides of your face.
Really not churn. There is churn. And so if you come back after 10 o'clock, you're not wandering the streets, you're welcomed into the shelter, and if there's not a bed available for you at that shelter, we then would transport you to an available bed.
Mrs. Green， 请允许我用中文向你提问，因为这里有很多像我一样听不懂英文的人。Please allow me to talk in Chinese because so many people here don't understand English, so I can try to represent them. 我刚才听你说了一个非常可笑的问题。你家有孩子吗？请你正面回答我。这说的，我想问一下你，你家有孩子吗 ？I want to ask you, do you have children? Do you have children at home?
Do you have children?
Do you have children? You have children?
Do any of you guys?
No, I don't have children.
就因为你没有小孩，你才会说出那句不该说的话。200个油门跟3000个小孩在一起，你们选择油门？请问大家是小孩重要还是油门重要？两者哪个更重要？ Because you are talking on behalf of the 3,000 children. Which is more important? 你如果是一个有小，不是油门。If you are the mother of children, you consider more about the children.
take the next question.
Is there a question on this side? Oh, this side?
Hi, my name is Diane Kovac. I am a member of the College Point Civic and Taxpayers Association. I am also a co-chairperson, and I am the recording secretary who takes the notes and reads the minutes of the meeting. College Point has a very unique geography. We are cut off and isolated from the rest of New York City by the Whitestone Expressway. We only have 4 roads in and out. And over my time working at the Civic, we have been fighting to get our roads repaired, to have New York City address the increased traffic, truck traffic, the lack of bus and transportation. We've been dealing with schools, finally got a middle school after, I don't know, it's probably 40 years. Would have liked a high school, but we didn't get that. And my question to West Ham is, how did you find out about this factory building being available in College Point when most people, when you say, I live in College Point, they always respond, where's that? I never heard of it. These people that even live in Queens never heard of it. That's how isolated we have been.
I appreciate that question. You know, in all the years that we've been doing this, I had mentioned earlier that we've been in the homeless service business for 30 plus years. The other part of our organization is we do a lot of supportive housing and we do a lot of real estate development. So we're constantly out there looking for opportunities, whether it be shelter opportunities, supportive housing opportunities, any type of affordable housing opportunity. This particular shelter is being developed by a developer that we work with on another project. We had a really good experience with this developer. Project has gone very well, and we worked together on this particular building. That's how this particular building.
Well, one question I would like to ask is approximately the date when you found out about this, because permits were filed in the DOB that had nothing to do with the shelter. He's been renovating this building under basically phony paper. And when we found out about it in the community, Dan Rosenthal asked for an audit, so the permits were revoked. Then a day before our civic meeting, permits were refiled for a homeless shelter. But all this time, they've been doing renovations and alterations outside the scope of what the permits allow. So my question is, about what date did the owners of this building, or maybe it was the prior owners, contact you?
Yeah, I'd have to check on the specific date. I don't know what it was exactly. But I would be happy to check that and get back to you with that information.
We're happy to provide all the timeline and all of that information to the Civic Association. We don't have it off the top of our head, but we will provide that for you.
College Point is one of the most isolated neighborhoods in Queens. Limited public transportation, hospitals 10 minutes away at best, and that's only if you have a red light on top, right? Our town is probably no more than 4 square miles, and this thing is centered right in the middle, 1.5 miles that way, 1.5 miles that way, geographically located around 4 schools. I don't know if the Lutheran school is still there, but we got that. Yet along the edges of the College Point itself and the surrounding areas, we have a waste transfer station, a sanitation garage, a sewer treatment plant, the borough-wide drop-off recycling, police academy, the narcotics unit, the police tow pound, Con Edison, and a bus depot. Okay? I think I did my homework. If there are any more, please let me know. And I just want to, I also made a note about the ratio of security officers. I think you said 10 on duty during the day, or per shift? How many per shift?
5 to 6.
Okay, I mean, all right. I mean, that ratio is about what I'm familiar with that Rikers Island provided about 3 years ago. Just saying. Yeah, anyway, if you want to reply.
Yeah, depending on the shift. Like when we have a morning shift, when we have a lot of service staff on site, case management staff, social workers, etc., we would have a little bit less security. We would have more security on the afternoon shift and the overnight shift when there's a lot of activity in the building. So we would go anywhere between 4 and 5 on the like 9 to 5 shift, and the mid-afternoon and overnight shifts would have anywhere from 8 to 12, frankly, security staff on site.
5 or 6, there's more.
Okay.
5 or 6, there's more than that here right now.
We have all these facilities in College Point, but we have no police precinct in College Point.
That's
the
right.
police precinct is all the way in Flushing. You have to go almost 10 miles before you get to a police precinct. So you're going to call 911. The police are not going to come and save our kids. They're not going to come to our community and save us. What do you say to that? We have no police presence in College Point. Your guards are not going to be patrolling our neighborhood. The police are not in College Point.
So we will certainly work closely with the precinct and evaluate what resources are required. We'll certainly work closely with the precinct and closely with the NYPD and evaluate what resources are required and ensure that the required resources are brought to bear here. I did want to address your question, Brian, because I'm grateful that you were willing to moderate tonight. So first of all, you know, I think that often when we come into communities, we end up being sort of the tip of the spear of what comes out of on lots of complaints or frustrations on other city services and other lacks of services, and I totally get that and appreciate that, and I think a really engaged community is critical. And so the fact that the hospital is far away, the fact that there aren't appropriate bus routes or something like that, I am often up here wishing that I also controlled the bus routes or also controlled the MTA and could bring additional resources to bear. The one thing I will say is that we as DHS can represent your needs and your issues to City Hall and to our fellow city agencies, and often do. For example, we were opening a shelter in the Soundview neighborhood of the Bronx, and we got feedback that across the street from the shelter, the police were having trouble responding to some, prior to us being there, some what they thought was drug activity, and they didn't have a good handle on it. And so we added additional cameras to the roof of our site and shared that feed in real time with the NYPD. And in another location, the community had been asking for a very long time for a transportation study around a particular intersection, and we were able to get that transportation study done. And so we do really mean, when we say we want a dialogue about what your needs are, we do really mean that, and we will and want to and will help carry that water with my peers and in the sort of city and state space to make this, to make this work as best it can.
Road. We are 2 miles from the main Northern Queens transportation hub, but meanwhile, if you can get to Main Street by bus in under 20 minutes to 30 minutes, 2 out of 5 days a week, you're lucky. I mean, that's how poor our service is. And then of course they come 3 in a row. But I'm just bringing this out for the people that will be housed at the shelter. How are they going to get to where they're supposed to be going during the day? The system is overburdened as it is. In addition to that, in regard to the area surrounding the shelter, 6 out of the 8 curbs surrounding the shelter have prohibit parking. The surrounding blocks have 0 available parking at dinner time. So with the staff of 10 or 12 people, additional cars, I have neighbors that have to take car services now because they work at hospitals, get home at 11 o'clock at night, and they have to pay for car services because there's nowhere to find parking now, and now you're going to incorporate a shelter in regard to this. It's a very stressed neighborhood. I mean, how many people parked within a block of this place tonight? Raise your hand. Oh, okay, we're talking about 20. Anyway, thank you. My statements are done, so thanks for listening.
I appreciate the question. In terms of the parking for the shelter itself, let me address that first. The shelter does have a parking lot. We have, it's similar to what we have at other programs. We make it work. We will not become a burden to the local community in terms of the parking. I am saying that tonight. in response to your question regarding clients and transportation, we will have 2 full-time drivers on staff. We will also have 2 15-passenger vans within the program where we will be able to shuttle clients back and forth. Appointments, employment, whatever it may be, that service will be offered to our clients.
What about the staff? Where are they going to park?
Hi, my name is Mark Flynn. I'm a resident of College Point. I don't believe anything you guys are saying. Rally around John Wall. As a community, the only thing I'm going to say to you guys is you should think about this. Think about your family. Think about if you want your kids to still play on the front lawn.
It's a family. It's not about family. It's what they have in the
Excuse me, ma'am. We're going to I want you six to think about your families and see, think if you want to have your mother sitting on the front lawn on a recliner, drinking lemonade, worrying about her while you're at work, or if you want to put up a 6-foot fence. And if we have to put up fences, are you going to give us a tax incentive? And should we get an easier carry permit? What are you going to do for us? You're really wrecking our town. I'm getting a dog. So don't respond, because I don't want to hear anything you have to say.
Hi, I just have a question about people who's going to be in the shelter. Are they going to be free? Are they able to go on their own, take buses, come back? That's how it's going to be. So I cover schools around Queens. I'm a nurse that goes to different schools. I covered a lot of schools in College Point, especially the school with girls. I call up the parent, and some parents are far away. They're not there to pick up the kids. And the girl is adult enough to go on the bus. So sometimes, even in the middle of the day, those children that I send home go on the bus by themselves. How would I know what happened to them on the way home? Or even if they go together and they stay together, just a couple girls get on the bus and the same guys on that bus. Like, how are the parents going to be safe that they went? I mean, I know the security around the building, but how can you secure their being after they leave the area? And a lot of kids go on the school bus, on the regular buses. And I go all around.
I want to say again, we have clients in our system from every single community, including this community. So I would ask you, ma'am, how do you know that today? And I don't think it will change in 8 months.
But why do you want to make that worse than it is? It's still dangerous because there are single mothers. They work 2 jobs. They can't pick up their kids. Those kids go alone and go open the door and go in their houses by themselves. And in College Point as well. And also boys.
Why do you want us to take that chance with our kids?
Don't wait till it's too late.
Maybe. You need a camera. And you can say, oh, well, something happened.
Let's take the next one.
The gentleman, 2 guys before me, the speaker 2 before me, stole my thunder. I agree with him. I don't believe anything he said. You did everything behind our back. You didn't ask us about this, or didn't even give any access or any input about where to put a shelter, if we wanted a shelter. So for that reason, the only question I have is, how do we make sure this shelter does not go up?
Hello, my name is Jimmy Clement. I have lived in this town. I've lived in this town my whole life, 68 years. I've been to several of these meetings, and I've heard you say repeatedly, I have 5 shelters in my neighborhood. I want you to promise us now, you're ramming this one down our throat. Can you promise us now, if this goes through, we won't get 4 more shelters in College Point? What's our guarantee? Once we open up the floodgates, the Department of Homeless Services will be grabbing every single building in this neighborhood and changing it to a homeless shelter.
Don't be I mean, we don't. Here's our citing philosophy. Let me give you our citing philosophy. It's not going to answer your question specifically because I don't make pronouncements in the middle of these meetings, but here's our citing philosophy. What we're trying to do is move our system back to a borough-based system, right? What we're trying to do is make sure that there is sufficient shelter in Queens for everyone in the system who is from Queens. There are 8,000 people, over 8,000 people, in the DHS system on any given night whose last home address, the last time they were stably housed, was Queens. We are trying to make sure that we have sufficient shelter space to house people who are from Queens in Queens. That's the goal. That's also the goal in Staten Island, it's also the goal in the Bronx, it's also the goal in Brooklyn, it's also the goal in Manhattan. And so we are opening shelters across the 5 boroughs, including in Queens. You know, it is a pretty rare thing where we would open several shelters in one small neighborhood. That doesn't happen often. We don't rule anything out. We don't rule anything in. The way we open shelters is not-for-profits propose shelters, and we rate them and review them. We do environmental assessments, we negotiate budgets, and then we make final decisions. Let's take the next question.
Okay, so I have 2 minutes. I'll do a statement and then a quick question.
Sure.
So, I was at the Papanusen thing, I was at the rally about a couple of weekends ago on a Sunday. 200 single men. You've repeated they're not going to be SPMI, civilians and mentally ill, they won't be schizophrenics, no medication on site. However, the material you handed out to us said there will be mental health services provided on site. That's one. They'll also be shipped out to local providers. 200 men. If they're not mentally ill, they have no substance abuse. And we all have been down on luck, we've had problems. I've had people crash on my couch. I've had people live in my basement. I've had sister or whatever sleep on the floor in their mattress. The idea that 200 men are incapable of having anyone else in their life who can help them, that becomes our responsibility for an extended period of time when suppose there's nothing wrong with them. You said that maybe they'll go to mom's house, it doesn't work out, they'll come back. Well, why can't you get along with mom? Why don't they make their best faith effort to ingratiate themselves with people where they have a support system? You can look down, you can suck your teeth. I'm dead serious. We have all done whatever we can to support people.
So I would say that your family member and your friends are lucky to have you, and I'm lucky to have people in my life, but it's not true that it's not true that every New Yorker has a family network. In fact, we find often that when you dig into who experiences homelessness versus who doesn't, it can often be about whether or not they experienced trauma as a child, right? So was that bond with mom or dad or their siblings broken in a young way, in an unsafe way? So that's true. We also would also say that that often the ability to take in your family members, the ability to take in friends is a function of how much space you have. There are certainly communities across the city where mom is already living doubled up or tripled up. There are somewhere between 500,000 and 600,000 people in the city who are living not as the primary tenant, which means they're already living doubled up or tripled up. About 60,000 of those people who are living in unstable housing are in the shelter system, certainly not all. So there's a lot of stuff that can go on in someone's life that sends them to experiencing homelessness. I will say this, I believe deeply no one chooses to be homeless. I believe deeply that people who are seeking our help are very much in need of our help. I'm not trying to stand up here and say that our clients have no problems, right? That certainly wouldn't be honest of me and wouldn't be fair. Do our clients have problems? Yeah, of course, right? Our clients have complicated lives and they're going through a complicated time. I think that's really different than our clients are bad people or our clients are criminals. And so I think there's lots of reasons. There's lots and lots of reasons that you might not be able to stay with mom, or you might not be able to stay with a friend. Our population is aging. When we look at the shelter system, our single adults are getting older. We're getting more and more people who might have been renting an apartment for 30 years, 40 years with a spouse. The spouse dies and they end up in the shelter system. It's heartbreaking. Certainly to see the aging population of shelter is heartbreaking. None of our seniors should experience homelessness, but it's happening in this city and in this country because of the skyrocketing rents and the fact that wages and our social safety net don't keep pace.
Excuse me, I just want to say one thing. You see the children in this audience? I want you to tell them 100% they're going to be safe. I bet you can't say that. Tell the children in the audience they're going to be safe. Our citizens are going to be safe. You cannot say that.
I can't say that to anyone.
Yeah, you can't say that. Because our children are walking the streets, these guys are going to be out, and one person's going to follow 200 men? I don't think so. You told us citizens we're going to be safe.
I can't guarantee anything to anyone, right?
Excuse me.
I can't guarantee I'm safe going home tonight. But what I can say is that our clients are not bad.
No, you said they're coming from jail, did you not? Now you're saying, oh, they came from mom and dad. You said they're coming from jail.
Absolutely.
Did they go to jail for being jaywalking?
Absolutely, some men in our system have been to prison, have been involved in the criminal justice system. But I think we all know and now accept that for decades, people were going to prison for very low drug offenses with completely racially motivated drug laws, and we're seeing the results of that play out not only in the criminal justice system, but also in the employment market and in the housing system.
I just want to add one thing to that too. We've actually had better success in our programs where we have formerly incarcerated men than we do with guys who aren't incarcerated in terms of employment. Guys who are engaged, who want to participate. That's not me.
All right, the borough president representative would just like to introduce herself.
I'm from Borough President Melinda Kat's office. Tonight, I was sitting here from the first minute until the end of this meeting. I have been taking the notes already, and I will bring back everything, your concerns, your anger, the voice back to our Borough President Melinda Kat. Thank you so much.
My name is Stephanie. My husband's family has been a lifelong 2 generations living in College Point. I would just like you to please clarify, to paint the picture a little more clearly. Excuse me, because when I attended the previous meetings, I maybe naively thought it would be a 200-bed shelter with 200 occupants that had some responsibility for almost like a sign in, sign out, or accountability every day and every night of where they were. Tonight I'm hearing a little different, a little more full picture. I've heard the word churn, I've heard the word transient, I've heard the explanation that they can be in one place up to a year, but they are allowed to go in and out, and that they may not have to return to that same place every night. So if they're not there, who's accountable for them? How do you know where they are? And if they have the ability to go to another shelter, you said someone may be able to come into this shelter that night. So it sounds very transient, and I don't really think that we all have a very clear picture of, because if you have 200 people potentially in one night, but they're moving around, some nights you may have an occupancy of 100, some maybe 200. If they're not working, where are these other people who are not working? Where are they during the day?
Let's clarify that. It can be confusing. Let's clarify that for you. Thank you for the questions. Okay. So, where do I want to start? All right, so it's a 200-bed shelter. The first thing that will happen is that about 20 men a week, give or take, will be assigned to the shelter until it's full, right? And then what will happen is some men will leave the shelter. And that can be, we know where they went. It can also be that they were using the shelter services, and on Wednesday and on Thursday they didn't come back to the shelter, and we didn't see them for a week. When that happens, we will assign another man from our assessment sites to that shelter. So now you might have 201 men assigned to that shelter, right? That doesn't, you're not sheltering more than 200 at any time. It's that one man left, right? Maybe they got housing, maybe they left because they got housing, maybe they left because they found a friend to stay with, and we don't know that. But there's never more than, I'm going to answer your question, you just got to let me get through it. There's never more than 200 men at the site at one time. And so that happens. There might be, there might be 220 men assigned, there might be 230 men assigned. We've gotten really good at this, at making sure that there is capacity, that these guys will have capacity, and guys tend to stay. West Hab tends to know, our assessment site and our placement team tends to know how that goes, right? But we don't. But what we do have everyone sign in and sign out, right? So it's not that we don't know who's there. We know who the 200 men that are there at any given time are. It's that can be a little bit fluid as people get assigned to the site, people get housed, people find jobs, but it's not that anyone can show up to the site, right? You can't, if you're assigned to that site, you can't go to some other random shelter. If someone else is assigned to some other shelter, they can't come to College Point, right? We track the census and we track the shelter roster daily. And so it's a real operation behind the scenes to make sure that everyone needs a bed that night has a bed, that people have a home shelter, that home shelter has capacity for them. Jim is speaking, sir.
I just wanted to answer the second part of that question. We had talked about that earlier in terms of what these gentlemen are going to be doing during the day. We'll have many activities on site during the day, employment activities, education activities, rec activities, and guys will be out working, etc. This will not be an opportunity where 200 men are going to be sitting around doing nothing all day.
Okay, I'm going to follow up. I was asked by someone in the audience as a follow-up to the statement that you don't attempt to put multiple shelters in the neighborhood. And the question was, then why do you have 5 in your neighborhood?
So what I said is that I didn't anticipate putting a shelter down the block, right? Or, we don't tend to, as we're looking across the city, we don't tend to put a site in College Point and come back in 6 months. But the shelter system has built up over the last 30 years. Shelters, Queens, particularly outside of Southeast Queens, has had very, very few shelters. As we are starting to open up shelters in a more diverse set of neighborhoods, we're having these community engagements, and I think it's important to open up shelter in a more diverse set of neighborhoods. I think it's important that it's not only Jamaica that has shelters here in Queens. So there are communities across the city that have dozens of shelters. I certainly don't know of that location half a block away from this shelter. We wouldn't open a shelter half a block away from this shelter. We don't have any plans to open a second site in College Point, but we don't rule neighborhoods out. We never do that. And really our goal in our plan, our Turning the Tide plan, is to make sure that Queens has a sufficient shelter to shelter people who are from Queens, and that we drive to a more equitable shelter siting practice, including siting shelters in neighborhoods that have never had them, like College Point. Okay.
These residents that come in, are they screened for weapons?
Yes, of course. There are magnetometers at the entrance to most of our shelters. There will be magnetometers at the entrance to this shelter. I don't know if you want to say.
There's X-ray machines as well as handheld ones.
What do you do to the weapons? What do you do to the person? Do you turn them away or what?
I'm sorry, I didn't get the first part
The
of it.
person comes into the person that comes into the shelter.
Somebody tries to bring a weapon in, the police are immediately called. Weapons are confiscated, police are called.
Hi, my name is Fran. I'm a lifelong resident of College Point, 63 years. I have two questions. First of all, before this shelter was proposed in College Point, did any of you even know where we were? Did any of you have an idea where College Point was?
Yes, I said it a couple hours ago, but my stepmother went to school at St. Agnes and
one person.
Oh, okay. The woman who raised me for the last 20 years.
Second question is, before you go into a community and propose a shelter, are there any impact studies done at all? Do you even know about our infrastructure? Do you even care? I get that feeling that you're just here because you need to be.
Absolutely. So we do 2 studies prior to opening a shelter, both of which will be released in this case prior to opening. The first study we do is a fair share analysis that looks at city facilities in a 400-foot radius, a half-a-mile radius, and the community board writ large. And then the second study we do is a phase 1 environmental assessment that looks at a number of different factors, including if it's a families with children site, they look at how many spaces are open in the local schools, but it looks at education, it looks at, it tests the soil, it looks at environmental factors, it looks at transportation, it looks at a wide range, and both of those are published, provided to the community prior to opening.
How long do these studies go on? I mean, it's going to take 3.5 years to open a hockey stadium in Belrose. You're opening a homeless shelter in our community in a matter of months.
That's true. I mean, that's true. The studies, I don't know how long the fair share takes.
You should do that study first, no?
Yeah, so the analysis is being done as we're now, and then they'll be drafted and finalized.
$9 million for 200 men is blowing my mind. What is the name of the man that owns that building that's going to make himself rich on us?
Well, the city doesn't contract with the landlord. The city contracts with West Hat, the provider. So hold on. I want to be really clear about something. $9 million is the total contract value. That is not the real estate cost, right? That would certainly be an exorbitant real estate cost. $9 million is the total contract value. So that has to fund staffing, that has to fund services for the men, that has to fund food, it funds security, it funds maintenance, it funds repair, that has to fund transportation for all the men. That is the total contract value. So that is not the real estate piece of the contract.
Okay, that $2,000 each man a month. Who gets that $2,000 a month?
So I know that the senator said that number. I don't know where he got that number, so I can't speak to that number.
If you have a question, please come to the mic. The gentleman over here, please.
Hold on, take the mic. Can she get the mic?
You can hear me good. You can hear me good.
Honestly, I can't. Would you speak into the mic?
You're talking about all this time about the men, how well they're going to be fed, how well they're going to have security, how well we'll have a job. Yes. But you never said one moment about these kids that were screaming to you. Right. Did you go summertime to the park, the little park? Yes, yes. Full of people, some Chinese, they dancing like kids. That's where they're going to be hanging out. You have no seat to sit. It's so joy, and only one homeless comes around, and he doesn't even have place to sit, and you want to bring 200 men hungry for women, for kids, for everything. to Flushing. I took 2 trains.
That's right.
In order for me to have not a seat, but just a place to stand in the bus, I went all the way to the end of the College Point to catch a bus just to go to my job at 8 o'clock.
Yeah.
And I came 7:30, night and day. And I have 2 kids here. The day they were 9, 10, and my heart was going, and I called the neighbor. I think nobody's home. I think I didn't make it to come. Could you imagine these kids, these police? I see the kids, and they care about the noses of the police. Yeah, what happened? What happened? You know, it's, trust me, I don't care. I'm old, I'm gonna die tomorrow. This is not, it's for the future of these kids.
Yes.
I'll have people, and they come, I'll have my cake, and I'll give them everything back. I'm strong, but the kids, please consider, there are so many places. Thank you for listening.
Thank you. What you saying? I just hope that you people realize, like sitting up there, you realize all the concerns in this room. You sit there, you shake your head, yes, and you know what the funny thing is? Every answer you gave tonight, you're so scripted. You are so scripted. I'd like to know the other 2 people sitting next to you. Are they there for moral support? We haven't heard from them. Every question is answered by you. I see you referring to him and him writing down things or whatever. Right? I see you. You are very scripted with your answers. Textbook script. Right? You take the heat for your bosses. Right? And listen, you guys are here. You're scripted also.
It's important to me to take the heat for my team.
Take the heat for your team. Why don't they come down when people give us real answers then? Because you can't give us answers. If you sit there and you give your questions all night. Scripted. If I go to 10 meetings, I'll hear the same 10 answers. Come on. No, wait. I'm not trying to speak what you want. Right? Because, look, you guys are important for the profit. Plain and simple. Developers. You are realtor developers.
Hold on.
All right?
SCAB is a not-for-profit organization. We're not
non-for-profit?
We're a not-for-profit organization with 3 decades of experience serving.
Okay, what realtor developer is a non-profit organization?
They're not real estate developers.
They just said it before, he works with developers. I'm sorry for getting excited.
We develop affordable housing.
You develop affordable housing.
We are a non-profit organization. We do not profit from anything that we do. Listen, I want to address one other thing that you said, and I sort of want to address a lot of what's been talked about today. We've gone through this process many times with the city, and we do appreciate what you're saying, and we hear your concerns. They're legitimate concerns, and we take them very, very seriously. Every meeting, community meeting we've been to has been similar to this in terms of the concerns. And what I can say is in the 3 programs that we have open in partnership with DHS, we have worked extremely hard on those concerns. We've worked extremely hard after these community meetings to build a partnership with you. I don't want this relationship to be a one-sided or two-sided opportunity where it's just tonight. I want to continue this conversation after tonight. We're gonna develop a community advisory board for this program, and we're gonna want your participation. We're gonna expect your participation. We want to have that dialogue moving forward.
Oh, so one other, in this minute, this question's been asked a few times in different ways. When did you find out before that you became, a homeless shelter? Where the city was saying they do research, development, somebody was asking, research, what impact does it have? So, how long, when was Westhab involved with this before you actually came out just a short time ago to say, oh, we're opening up a homeless shelter on 127th Street and 20th Avenue?
Yeah, as we said, I honestly...
I know you don't know. I know you don't know. Like I said, you're facing a company right now, okay? You're giving scripted answers. There are answers that you do not have to some of the questions. So why don't the people who have the answers come to these meetings? Thank you very much.
Okay, we're going to be wrapping up in like 6 or 7 minutes.
I would like to know, we all pay tax. We do everything for the government. And the government and the city screw us like this. How they can do this? How they can do this? This is no cleaning. Here we have to clean our houses, front of the houses. We don't have no transportation, nothing. How they can screw us like this? And the other one, fraudulent. They should all go to jail who did this behind our back. Behind the company. And you should understand. And you are a wicked liar. This is fraud.
My name is Cheryl Clevin. I live in College Point. I've lived here my whole life. This is more of a statement than a question. I think where you lost me along the way, trying to keep an open mind about this, but this is my concern. I hear that West Ham, that you are involved in the development of affordable housing. So just this past week, we learned that the federal government is threatening to take over the low-income housing in New York City because of mismanagement. So that's number one. It's happening. It's been all over the news all week long. The federal government is threatening to come in because of the mismanagement under Mayor de Blasio's low-income housing. That's number one. Number two, we also learned through media and media outlets in New York that some homeless, not all, but some, have brought cases against DHS for lack of security and safety. So why does the community of College Point, having this been flown under the radar screen without community involvement, although you say that you want to continue to have this dialogue when it never started in the first place, before the community uncovered that it was happening, we have no faith and we have no confidence, period. So we're going to fight you.
On the affordable housing question, what you're referring to there is the New York Housing Authority, Public Housing Authority, NYCHA. That's different than the not-for-profit and at times for-profit development of affordable housing through the city's Housing Preservation Department. So NYCHA is not connected to what West Half does for a living professionally, not connected to what DHS does. Certainly they're a fellow city agency, and we will work with them in any way, shape, or form to help them dig in and make that housing better for the people living there, the 500,000 New Yorkers living there. But that's different than the affordable housing development that West Half does. That's the first thing. The second thing is you referenced lawsuits about safety or security of our buildings. I do want to say that it is true that sometimes when we come to open a shelter, community members, people will get together and sue the city over something about the shelter. Yes, I understand. But we have never lost one of those cases. We've never lost one of those suits. And that's because we follow all of the applicable laws. We follow HPD and FDNY and DOB regulations when we're getting ready to open a site. And our buildings end up being inspected more and audited more than any other building in the city.
My name is Mike Niebauer. I'm a member of the College Point Residents Coalition. I'm a survivor of the shelter because I worked next to a shelter on Northern Boulevard, the women's shelter, from 1981 to about 1993. It took us about 13 years to close it. Every day I was asked if I wanted to, if You want a date? I don't want a date. So prostitution, you're gonna get. Petty crime, make sure you lock your car, because they're gonna rummage through your car, loose change, cigarettes, cell phones, credit cards, wallets. Okay, I had to lock my car. Can you imagine? I worked for a congressman. We had to lock our front door. The Armed Forces recruiting station had to lock our door. We're not social workers. We're not babysitters, okay? We are very compassionate, caring people. And I want you to know, I want to thank you, because I've become an advocate for the homeless people myself. I'm going to look for a positive solution. And you know what? I thought about it the other day. Remember about 10 years ago, New York State closed all those hospitals? Parkway Hospital, Mary Magdalene Hospital, St. John's Hospital, Peninsula Hospital. Why can't we reopen them and help our people? Let's get homelessness, opiate addiction, okay? Suicide prevention. Let's get the family structure back online, and let's get these people integrated back in society. Career training. All those hospitals are white elephants. Let's reopen them. $9 million. We can reopen Parkway Hospital, Mary Magdalene Hospital. You got beds, and we'll have a lot of volunteers. Thank you. Thanks.
Okay, yeah, please make it quick. We're obligated to be out of the school. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay, my name is John Lynch. Okay, I'm from College Point, 60 years. Okay, I seen the good and I seen the bad in this town. Now this guy here is telling us we're gonna have all the security. Just about 3 weeks, maybe a month ago, they had one of them homeless directors shot and killed by one of the guys in the shelter. So much for that security that you're gonna protect these people in there. You know what I'm talking about, right, sir? You read that, right? That woman, okay? He got shot, and they knew about this. And then I work over by a woman's shelter in Astoria, and I see what happens. There are people coming in during the night through a bus, that they come during the night and they turn around left and right over there. And I used to work nights, and I see them hanging out in the streets and everything else, throwing crap all over the roads. So don't tell me you're going to have this all monitored and everything else. It's not going to be like that.
Okay, sir, whatever you're referencing did not happen. There were, none of our staff were shot 3 weeks ago or a month ago or this year.
I'm not sure what you're talking about either, to be quite frank.
The guy perpetrated shot this lady.
Okay, this is the last question. Thanks.
Good evening. I'd like to know if you can guarantee that any of these transient men do not have prison records, are not sexual predators, are not having problems with alcoholism and drug abuse. I mean, how could you guarantee that to us, that these people are definitely going to get service? But as far as sexual predators, how would you know? How could you guarantee to us that you are not going to have any man come into the shelter that's a sexual predator?
Sure. So I think the other questions we addressed in terms of people who've committed sex crimes. The state has very strict laws about where people on the oh gosh, I'm forgetting the name. It's a SARA list, but I'm forgetting what it stands for. But people who have committed, who have residency restrictions related to sex crimes will not be permitted at the shelter. Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you all for coming out. I really appreciate it. I am sure this is certainly not the last time we'll engage in dialogue. And I hope you all have a very good night. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, neighbors.
Thank you. The cameras are back there. They're not filming. No shelter, solid force.